So no one can really provide every service to an immigrant client, but working together, the organizations that were involved in the study showed that they really can do a good job by referring and assisting immigrants getting to the right place to get that help. So that was a strong finding that came out of the study. So also concerned to kind of immigrant needs in the workplace were immigrant expressions of want or need for further language training, education upgrading, and workforce or career development services. And a solid 75% of the immigrants involved in the study felt a want or need for any of those services. And that could range from anything from very basic language training to very advanced. So there's a strong want for further training in the communities. And that kind of links into the next finding, which a lot of participants brought up the fact that although immigrants might come to small towns, they might end up leaving eventually if, say, there's not enough educational opportunities, particularly for their children. And they'll tend to migrate to bigger centers such as Calgary or other places for more of those opportunities. So in a sense, if more educational opportunities and training opportunities are available in local communities which match local labor force needs, immigrants may be more likely to stay in small towns. So that was another finding. I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about English language learning services because in terms of barriers into integrating into the workforce, language is one of the big ones. In all communities studied, there were language training services provided in one form or another. So it would either be provided by community adult learning centers, by volunteer tutor agencies, or just by sheerly volunteer-run programs. So most of these programs exist for lower English level classes. However, in some communities, particularly out in the Bow Valley, where language instruction for newcomer to Canada, LINK classes are available, there's more intermediate and advanced classes available. Still, that being the case, most immigrants that were involved in the study expressed some frustration at not having more advanced or intermediate classes available. So that would be the gap, that although the services for language training are available, they don't always match with the needs. And that really has to do a lot with the issue of critical mass in small towns. There's really just not enough immigrants to warrant having a beginner level class, an intermediate, and an advanced level class in a lot of cases. And so what ends up happening is usually multiple language learners are put in the same class, and it's just a reality. But looking forward to some other options in terms of, well, how can we better provide English language learning services? There's a lot of different options. So it's looking at link training online, the language instruction for newcomers to Canada, or other blended learning options. The college recently piloted a few video conferencing projects for ESL, and it's promising. You really need to make sure that the capacity for the technology is there and that you have that tech support as well. It's vital to making sure those projects are successful. So there's lots of potential, and we'll kind of explore some of those again at the end in recommendations. So moving right along, at the beginning in the executive summary, I said there are barriers into integration. And so this is the list of basically the main barriers. Again, language is featuring pretty strongly. Foreign qualification recognition was probably, well, with language, it's top 1 and 2. I don't really know which one's which. But pretty big issues. And chronic underemployment, lack of Canadian work experience, weak professional social networks, issues with soft skills, and settlement issues all impact immigrants' ability to really effectively contribute to workplaces. So I think I'd like to share another story. That's why we're here, I guess, today. So this one is about underemployment, and it really, as I mentioned before, I really want to kind of get into the complications that exist and what they look like in real people's lives. And so in particular, one of the immigrants that I spoke with, she was formerly a registered nurse in Europe, and she moved to one of the local communities, and as is commonly the case, she decided to put her own career in getting her foreign credentials recognized to ensure that her family could really settle effectively and that her children were happy in their schools. And so finally, when she decided that her family felt settled, she decided just to get out into the workplace, just to try something. So she applied for a caretaking position at a local hospital. And when the HR team saw that a registered nurse was applying for a caretaking position, they kind of thought, well, we could probably use her somewhere else. So they hired her on as a healthcare aide. which was good because she was actually still in her field. However, it's working as a healthcare aide, it's a much lower level of skill, and I guess in terms of hierarchy, than working as a registered nurse, which is what she was formerly working as. And she explained that she was happy to be given the opportunity to still work in her field. However, she encountered a lot of issues with her coworkers, particularly really young registered nurse that were Canadian born and trained, who didn't have that much experience. Whereas she's a healthcare aide trying to provide care to a patient with over 20 years of experience as a registered nurse, and she doesn't want to step on anyone's toes. So she said there was some sort of conflicts or just challenges working with her coworkers who were sometimes intimidated by her level of skill because she was forced in a lower position in the hierarchy to not use those skills. And so that's a perfect example of underemployment and that lack of effectiveness. She can't really use her skill set as she would be able to. And so it primarily relates back to foreign qualification recognition, which is a big concern. And so building on that, almost equal numbers of immigrants in the study said that they were able to use their previous education and experience in their current positions. So just under 40 said that they were, and 40% said that they weren't able to. And I should point out also, many of the immigrant participants were very generous in saying that they were able to use their skills. I remember one person who was working in a fast food restaurant. When I asked them the question, well, are you able to use your skills in their position? They said, well, yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in management, and I use my people management skills every day. And I just kind of thought, okay, that's a very positive outlook. So getting into that issue of foreign qualification recognition a little bit more, over 60% of the participants said that they hadn't used any foreign qualification recognition services. And this is due to a lot of different reasons. Oh, and I'll just give a quick little definition for those of you who don't know what foreign qualification recognition is. It's basically getting your qualifications or credentials from another country recognized here by professional associations in Canada so that you can practice in your field here. And this is usually only for regulated professions such as healthcare, generally doctors, engineering. Those are a couple of the big ones. And so a lot of the immigrant participants said that they really hadn't even bothered using the services. One, because they're very time consuming. There's a lot of forms to go through. Number two, they can be very, very expensive. And number three, the process itself is just very complicated. And so those who had used foreign qualification services effectively, who got their foreign qualifications recognized, either used services, which cost them a lot of money, or managed to get their qualifications recognized in a roundabout way. For instance, I remember someone who had a European master's, which wasn't recognized in Canada, but it was recognized in the States, and Canada recognized the master's in the States, so it kind of was through a back door. But it would be situations like that. That's why people had their qualifications recognized. It was either they had help with it, or there was some kind of a loophole. So I'll just expand again on the kind of what other issues exist with foreign qualification recognition. One of the ones that came up quite a bit with some participants was actually acquiring their transcripts from their home country. Say when they came to Canada and they didn't realize, oh, I need those to get to work in my field, they had a really hard time getting them, especially for participants who had established themselves in their career for many, many years. In those instances where perhaps the institution where they got their credentials, it maybe didn't exist anymore, and so that original paperwork was long gone, and that was a big barrier. And I remember for other immigrants coming from places like India, for instance, one immigrant said she went to the International Qualifications Assessment Service to get some help with getting her qualifications recognized. And they said, oh, it'll be really easy to get your transcripts. Just get your parents to get them. And she's kind of thinking, I studied in 3 different cities in India. There is no way my parents are going to travel to all those cities to get my transcripts for me. And furthermore, she said, it tends to be that public institutions and bureaucracies, there's so much more red tape there, she said, than here. And there tends to be some corruption, so you'll end up having to pay extra money to even get your transcripts. So those are the kind of barriers that immigrants are encountering in terms of getting their foreign qualifications recognized. And yet it's such a big part of the solution in terms of getting immigrants into fields, their previous fields, and working in positions that really utilize their skills and capacity. So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation here that we decided to include temporary foreign workers. And this was for a few reasons. Mostly our participants brought them up time and time again, very passionately, and we didn't really ask for that information, they just volunteered it. And so some of the main concerns around temporary foreign workers are that, it's pretty clear that they're contributing to our economy in terms of filling labor shortages, as well as in terms of paying taxes, and yet they can't access needed services in most instances, so it can be basic needs, as well as the training, language training and education. Anything that's formal or accredited, temporary foreign workers aren't able to access, and that was something that a lot of participants temporary foreign workers and employers alike were very frustrated by. I remember one participant that I spoke with as a temporary foreign worker. She was brought over as a professional, actually, and she said, I'm here because there's a skill shortage, and I'm not able to take any accredited training or learning so that I can increase my skill set and become a more productive worker. She said it just didn't make much sense to her. And this is especially problematic when many temporary foreign workers intend to work and stay permanently. As I mentioned, there's a few different programs available for temporary foreign workers to transition into permanent residence, one of which is the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program, another is the Canadian Experience Class. And so because immigrants can't access that accredited training and language training, and if they're intending to stay, it can unintentionally have the impact of impeding their career progress if they're going to be here for a longer time. And one of the other comments that was brought up a lot about temporary foreign workers was from service providers who don't receive any funding to provide services to temporary foreign workers, but because they see them as a clear part of the community, they still feel obligated to provide services for them. So they're doing that without any funding or acknowledgement. And so that puts a lot of stress on service providers who are already lacking some capacity in terms of small communities. So I'd just like to end the little bit on temporary foreign workers on a kind of on a positive note. One employer shared a really nice story, I thought, about how he decided to help integrate his temporary foreign workers. And he explained that, it's really about employer accountability in terms of really integrating all our newcomers and making them feel welcome. And so he said, if we're bringing temporary foreign workers in from thousands of kilometers away, in many instances, their first language isn't always English. We can't really just expect them to show up for work one day. He said, I make it my policy where we pick our temporary foreign workers up at the airport. We take them to their staff housing, and we make sure their fridges are full. And so I just thought that was such a great story that this employer knew the challenges in coming to a new country for work, kind of an unknown experience for a lot of newcomers, and really felt that accountability to ensure that we can support our newcomers as much as possible. And so on the previous slide, barriers to immigrant workforce development, the last issue was settlement issues. And that was another big finding out of the study, was that oftentimes settlement issues such as access to transportation, affordable housing, and childcare are seen as kind of a separate entity versus workforce development issues. However, in our study, it was time and time again issues like these impacting people's ability to take language classes at night, because if you don't have childcare, well then how are you going to be able to get there, or to get someone to watch your kids so you can go to class? Transportation was by far the largest issue, and in all communities that was impeding immigrants' ability to even get to work in some instances, as well as to access training. So that was definitely a large finding. So moving into the community-specific findings, I'll just state first off that more detailed information on the communities will be available at a later date. Right now we do have available the 2010 Community and Human Resource Profiles for each of the communities involved in the study, and that's available online at bowvalleycollege.ca, you got it, /community vitality.